We're all in a battle for our minds every day. How do we distinguish between the push and pull of the Holy Spirit versus our flesh? Just like any battle, we need to be prepared, and the Bible lays out clear instructions. Get armored up. It's time to engage in spiritual warfare. The Armor of God, Shoes of Peace, today on the Discipleship on Repeat podcast. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. We are your hosts, Matt and Chris. What's going on, Chris?
Hey, Matt. How are you, brother? Good to see you.
Doing well, man. Happy to be back on another episode of the Discipleship on Repeat podcast, where our goal is to entertain, enlighten, and encourage you, our listeners. So thanks for joining, everybody. We got another great episode for you guys.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. Really enjoying this Armor of God series, and so thankful for the opportunity to be doing this with you, Matt. And I know that you and I both have been really putting in some hard work to prepare these episodes for our listeners out there. Hope you guys are really getting a lot out of these. And so, yeah, man, I'm just glad to be doing this with you.
Me too, man. I've really enjoyed this Armor of God series we've been got going on here, man. This is something we've been looking forward to for a while, and we're getting neck deep in this thing now. We're on week 3, Shoes of Peace. So we got some good stuff to share with you guys about that, and we're going to get you guys armored up so you can get out there and take on the world. But before we do that, we got a good segment coming up for you. That's right. If you hear that sound, it's the left-handed shake of the week. Important segment of our show that we like here. You guys have been giving us great feedback. You love the stories and everything, so we're going to keep it rolling with the left-handed shake, and hope you guys are out there doing the same. Mm-hmm. So we got some stories to share with you guys about it. I've got a story I'm going to share with you guys about a guy I did some work for, or client of mine, I should say. Called the Colonel, and that's his name he's going to have here.
That's great.
Yeah, but super cool guy. Got to meet him a couple of months ago. Met him one day and did a transaction for him that kind of took a few weeks to complete. And first time I met him, just super. I had a great conversation with this guy. Just knew right off the bat this was a guy, older guy, but just retired military. And just hit it off really well with him, and just enjoyed speaking with him. And I just felt like it was going to be we were going to have a good working relationship. That's kind of where it left. And then he came back a couple of weeks later, next week, something like that. Afterwards, we had another meeting, and he looked totally different, man. He was totally. You could tell something was going on with him, and it was a super busy day for me. I think it was like a Monday or something. I'm always super busy on a Monday, trying to do all this stuff and kill all these tasks I got to do. But anyway, and he came in, and I thought, oh man, I could tell right off the bat something was going on. And then I gathered some documents from him and took it over to kind of get them scanned in our system and everything. And I was thinking to myself, man, okay, well, all right, God, I got a choice here. I'm super busy. I don't really have the time to talk to him, but he clearly needs to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
So what do you want me to do? And I had 30 seconds, 45 seconds to make a decision. Do I put aside my stuff, right? Thinking that I know what's best for my day, and then just, give him his stuff back and say, hey man, I'll see you next time. I'll be in touch. Or do I, take the time to really be witness to him, just be there for him, and ask him, and of course I chose the latter, and that's why this is a story. But I just said, you know what? Okay, listen, I'll just go ahead and see what, let me just talk to him. I really enjoyed speaking with him, so it didn't feel like a nuisance or anything. It just, I was just busy in my day. But anyway, so went back to my office, talked to him, said, hey man, look, I appreciate. Thanks for stopping in. I'm all done. I got everything I need from you, but I got to ask you before you go. You something looks like it's going on, man. Is there something you want to talk about, or is there anything I really enjoyed our conversation last time. Is there anything I can do for you?
Yeah.
Just kind of kept it like that. All I had to do was just ask, and then all of a sudden he started pouring out. He was ready to talk to somebody, and turns out he has a young 20s daughter that's autistic and high functioning and all this stuff, but she had some issues with some other girls her age that were just kind of ghosted her, man, and just kind of, they didn't want to be her friend anymore, and it was wrecking him how it was wrecking her, because he loved his daughter so much, and so I gave him that outlet, man. I gave him that time, and we had a great conversation. I could see him tearing up a little bit. And it was cool to kind of be in that moment and let him have that opportunity to speak. And I got the chance to, speak about the gospel to him a little bit. And it really just, our relationship just, took another level, man. And it was really cool to see. We ended up, and it totally changed my day, got to be able to realize that, hey, everything I thought I needed to do that day, God said, no, I need you to do this instead, So it's just a great example of what we think we need to do is not necessarily what God needs us to do. Right. And it's important to be available and obedient in those moments, because we just never know when God's going to interrupt us. And that's what he did for me that day. Long story short, we ended up finishing everything with the colonel. And at the end, he brought everybody in my branch food and everything. And so it was awesome to see, and I feel like I have a friend for life. He's even called me a couple times since then just to check in and stuff, which I normally don't get from clients. Usually once business is done, you may not hear from him again unless something comes up. But this guy it's just the type of guy he is, in the relationship we built, all because I was willing to step into that moment of obedience and just, play.
Open that door for vulnerability.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's great, man. Yeah, you were that trusted person that he could set his shield down for.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
and
great.
I set mine down too, and I met him where he was at. And I think that we need more of that in our world today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So along those same lines, just being obedient. Mm-hmm. You and I have been doing this podcast for a few episodes now, and I had the opportunity, one of my buddies has really been going through it and is trying to make some big life changes, and getting his life right. And getting right with Jesus and his marriage and his family life as a husband and as a provider. And so he's really been working hard towards that, but he kind of plateaued. And so he's, was kind of stuck and trying to get it figured out. And so I mentioned our podcast to him one day, and he constantly is listening to stuff. He does a lot of driving and whatever, to get to where he's got work to do. And so he was like, yeah, I'll give it a listen. And so he started listening to one of our more recent episodes, and he decided he was going to go back and listen to all of them. And so he went back and has listened to all of our episodes. And so, which was exciting. I'm like,
appreciate that.
Yeah, run our numbers up. Yeah. Like, this is great. And like and subscribe.
Yeah.
And so anyway, he told me that he'd gotten to the forgiveness episode.
Okay.
And the power of forgiveness. And so he listened to that, and it just impacted his life. And he realized that part of his plateau was he wasn't like accepting that forgiveness from God, and then like allowing himself to forgive himself and then forgiving others. And so he was stuck in the past, all that past hurt, because he wasn't able to let go and actually accept and give forgiveness, that whole forgiveness cycle that we had talked about. And so like, it was so great to hear that our episode that we were able to sit here and record and put out there for you listeners and for us to process through and to grow in our forgiveness, and to see that our obedience was impacting, a brother's life. And just because he simply listened to our podcast and was like, hey, that's what I need. And so from that, he dove straight in, and he's receiving that forgiveness and giving that forgiveness. And, I hope it continues to work and move in his life and make a huge impact in his life. But it just goes to show, like, him being obedient in that, God put that on his heart, hey, give this podcast a listen. And, us just sitting here like we are today and making this new episode, we're just impacting people, just doing what God's telling us to do. And so I'm really grateful to be here with you, Matt, doing this.
Yeah, me too, man. That's great. I love that story, and that's really a good shot in the arm that we need to continue on to do this. And we're not here for any sort of recognition or anything like that. This is our ministry. This is what we feel called to do, and we're just excited to do this. It's definitely grown our faith individually and collectively, and it's cool to see make a difference out there in the world too. I mean, what else can we ask for?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't always get to see it come full circle, and getting to see that's just super rewarding.
Absolutely. I love that. Thanks for sharing, Chris. That's
bro.
a great story, man. Folks, we got some great stuff here about the armor of God, shoes of peace for you guys, and so we're going to jump right into our discussion for today. So thanks again for joining us. So before we jump into the shoes of peace, let's talk about why we're, a little bit of a recap, but why we need to put on our armor. And that's because we need protection from the enemy. As John 10:10 states, our enemy is sent to steal, kill, and destroy us. So we need to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And we need, because we know that, as 2 Corinthians 10 states, that we are fighting against spiritual forces. We got to have things in place to keep us from the enemy, because God gave us this armor. We need to use it, right?
That's right.
So want to talk a little bit about our the whole armor of God here. So I'm going to read our scripture for the week, and that is Ephesians 6:10 through 15. If you're following along, here it comes. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. Stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and as shoes for your feet, put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. So there's our scripture for the week, folks. But remember that, to recap here, we got to put on our armor first. That's the first thing, right? We're facing forward. That's, we got to be collective, because our God's got our backs, but we got to be collectively guarding our fronts, shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm with our brothers. So we got to be in community, and we got to practice day in and day out. Soldiers don't get to be experts overnight.
That's right.
We got to learn to carry this armor around. So the first, to recap that armor itself, first we got to align ourselves with God's truth. That's the belt. Putting on the belt first. That's the first piece of armor. Holds everything together. I feel naked without my belt on. I got one right now. You know what I mean? So, and then next step is we got to do righteousness based on the truth. That's what we're guided. We're pushed to do righteousness because of God's truth, and we have that breastplate on to protect us and guard our hearts, which leads into what we're talking about today, and that's let peace guide your steps, because we got the shoes on. We got the shoes of peace, and we're ready. So talk to us then, Chris, about what we need to do with the shoes of peace.
Yeah, brother. I think just like all of these episodes, I think it's really good for us to know that definition of peace.
Absolutely.
Right? We need to know what we're working with today. And so as we talk about peace, one of the best definitions of peace that I came across was having calm and tranquility in mind, body, and spirit, despite chaos that's external.
Yeah.
And so letting that peace, in our minds and our spirit, be where we're at. And that peace is just like what you said. It comes from knowing the truth, and then living out his righteousness, living out Jesus' righteousness in our lives. And so it's really us stepping into this peace and always being ready and putting on those combat shoes, right? Those sandals, and walking in the peace. And so that leads straight into what I wanted to talk just for a minute about next, is kind of Paul wrote this, and he's describing the Roman soldiers. And so as these shoes that the Roman soldiers would be wearing, one of the preachers I was listening to talk about it, he called them combat sandals. You know, so I spent 20 years in the military wearing combat boots, and they're high. They come up on your calf. And depending on where you're going or what you're doing, will dictate what kind of shoes you got to wear.
Right.
But those they're laced up. The Roman soldiers had metal spikes in the bottom of their shoes, and that was to give them good traction. And so the Romans, they knew that the army with the best fitted shoes and the best traction win.
Yeah.
And so they wanted to outfit their soldiers with the best stuff. And so they gave them good, high laced up support for their ankles and that good firm foundation to stand on.
Yeah.
And so what that allowed them to do was to have good stability so they could stay in place and hold ranks together, or they could take the fight to the enemy and be mobile. And so that's kind of what I think we need to talk about today is stability and mobility. And so one of the things that we're going to dive into here is the stability piece is a whole bunch of different things kind of go into that.
Yeah.
And so really what I wanted to lead off with was that shalom, that perfect peace of God. And that's talked about in Matthew 6. It talks about don't worry about like where you're getting your clothes or what you're doing for food, but instead just seek God, seek the righteousness, and then he'll provide all of those things for us. And so as he's doing that, we don't need to be worried about those external things. We need to be focused on him, and he'll provide those things just like he does for nature. And so I think that that's really important. One of the next things that I wrote down was God is not a God of disorder or chaos. Our God is a God of order and like organization, and he wants peace within our congregations, peace when we meet up. And so like we have to we know that he's there. You can feel that spirit. That's his peace that's surrounding us. And so wanted to get that in there. That's out of 1 Corinthians 14.
Yeah.
And then also, of course, in Philippians 4:7, right?
Yeah, I love this.
He gives us the peace that transcends or surpasses all understanding. And so that's that peace that even in the storm, like we were talking about, that external chaos, our peace in our minds and our soul is just calm. And so like it's being in that moment of knowing all of this is going on around you, but you still feel like calm and you know what's going on like in your heart and you know that truth. So
yeah, and that's just real quick too, Chris. I think that's a great place to measure how at peace you are. If you are in the middle of a storm and you still have peace, that's where we need to be. That's where we should all strive to be. Yeah. It's easy to be peaceful when nothing's going on, right? Which isn't much in life, as we know. I mean, you get a few minutes of straight peace. It just doesn't happen often, unfortunately. That's the world that we live in. But if we can find peace in what the world would say is a place of worry and anxiety, man, that's really where we got to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we definitely need to settle into God's peace and realize like he's there and he's got those kind of that protections around us.
Yeah.
And so we can just kind of be in that moment in that peace with him and realize like our God's bigger than that chaos.
Right. Always.
Yeah.
Finding comfort in him.
That's right. And so that actually leads directly into what I was talking about next is we can find peace in Jesus's victory. And so in John 16 it says that we will have troubles in this world, but he's overcome the world, right? He's victorious in that. The very first thing he said in John 20 to his disciples, they were in the locked room afraid of the Jewish leaders. And he suddenly appears to them and he's like, peace be with you, right? So like Jesus is bringing the peace, right? He just suddenly appears. And so he had that peace in that moment where those disciples are like, oh my gosh, there's Jesus. And so like I think that peace and that calm just kind of washes over them. They're not worried about the locked door anymore. Like they're with the Savior. And so I think that's where we are, in those moments of that craziness that's going on in our lives, we can still have that inner peace in our soul and our mind to realize that God's with us and he's bringing that peace.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are great examples. And that's right. You got, Jesus is, he knows where he's going, unfortunately, at this point, and he's the last things he's talking about is giving peace, I like it too in John 14:27, where he talks about, peace I leave with you, it's his peace that he's leaving us. It's not the worldly peace.
Right.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between the two here in just a few minutes, but yeah, man, that's great.
Yeah. So now that we kind of have that stability idea in our mind, like the shoes of peace will bring us that stability, that foundation based on our truth and righteousness, where we can find that kind of calm and tranquility in our soul. Yep. I think now that we've stood firm, now it's time to take the fight to the enemy, right? Yeah. Now it's time to take action and use that traction to propel us forward to do God's work. And so I think that's where 1 Peter 3, it says, be ready always to share your gospel, to share the gospel of what's going on and how it's impacting your life. So I think that's amazing to be able to do that. And it says in Matthew 28 to go and make disciples of all the nations. Yeah. Right. So we got work to do.
For sure.
We're carrying that peace with us out into the world. So we're coming out to make peace. And so I had a funny story as I was making my notes. A buddy of mine, when I was stationed back in Alabama, back in the military, he and some of the boys were out back from our work building, and they were smoking and trying to figure out what they were going to do that night, and just kind of being crude. And it was a Wednesday night, and so I was in there working, doing some paperwork, and I popped my head out of the door, and I just pointed at my buddy, and I said, "You need Jesus," and just pointed straight at him. It's probably 5 or 6 guys out there, and I just pointed at him and said, "You need Jesus," and just walked back in the building. Like, that was it. No further conversation.
So they didn't know if you were joking or being serious.
No, and I kind of have that like in my personality where sometimes,
I see that.
Yeah, sometimes people don't know if I'm joking around or not. And so I just told him.
But you meant it deliberately.
I did mean it.
Yeah.
And so he'd gone with me to church a couple of times, but nothing, like, he wasn't committed to being there.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I said that to him, and then when they came back in a few minutes later, he walked over to me and he said, "Hey man, what are you doing tonight?" And I said, "Well, it's Wednesday. I'm going to church."
Mm-hmm.
And he said, "Oh, I'd like to go." And I said, "All right." I said, "I'll pick you up." So I grabbed him. We went to church. And then Sunday we went to church. And then Wednesday we went to church.
Oh.
And then and it was just kind of, became the norm. And so he was at church and going down there with me in the conversations. I think it was about a half-hour ride down and back. So, I got an hour of him, just like Paul. He's chained up to a guard. I got this guy, he's in the car with me, so we're going to talk Jesus. And it was fantastic. And through that, he came to a relationship with Jesus, gave his life to Jesus, was baptized. And it was amazing to watch that transformation happen in his life. Shortly thereafter, he wound up deploying over to Iraq, and again, a few months later, to Afghanistan. And in Afghanistan, like, the bad guys are shooting at him.
Wow.
And so, like,
that's chaos there.
Yeah. And so, like, in the midst of all that chaos, he's sending me messages back in email, and he's like, "Hey brother, I just want to let you know, like, I know God's with me."
Wow.
That peace that he had was there. It was so cool because in the middle of him getting shot at, he's grateful.
Yeah.
And so I really thought, what a cool story from me just sticking my head out and pointing at him and saying, "You need Jesus," not knowing how that would impact him. And just that moment of obedience, joking or not, it changed his eternity. Yeah. And it gave him peace in those hard situations. So, yeah, that's awesome. Super cool.
That's awesome, dude.
But yeah, it was, and then that kind of leads into him going overseas. He's a peacekeeper.
Yeah.
Or peacemaker. Sorry, peacemaker.
Yeah, he's peacemaking.
And I think there's a difference there. I think we're going to talk about that in a minute. But I think it was just a really cool story to move into. And then one of the other things I wanted to talk about too was, as we get this peace, sometimes when we're trying to make hard decisions in life, or even just, I guess, simple decisions, you'll go to make them and you just kind of have an uneasy feeling. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we get to see the Spirit move in us and stir that peace, where certain times you're like, I just don't feel good about this. My wife says that sometimes when we're making decisions about different things. Usually, like, do we buy this car, or do we go on this trip, or whatever? And I'll say, well, what do you feel about it?
Yeah, me too.
Right.
Yeah.
And she'll say, I'm good with it. Like, I feel good. And she feels that peace, that inner peace inside her that says, yeah, this is okay. Right. And I think when you feel that peace or you don't feel that peace and you're like, I don't feel good about that, probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the Spirit talking through that peace in our soul to let us know, like, hey, go that direction or not. And I think the term you called it the other day as we were talking about this, that peace radar, to kind of give us that guidance on what's going on. I think you kind of hit it on the head with that. It kind of enlightens us to, like, the direction we need to go.
Yeah, that's ultimately what peace gives, man, and provides. And that's really cool. I appreciate you sharing that story, man, about your friend. That's a great example of really an extreme example. Most people aren't going to have bad guys shooting at them all the time,
right.
To create chaos. Our definition of chaos in life, is much different than that, and for most people, but nonetheless. That's just a great example that if he, in that spot, he was getting, not knowing if he's going to live the next day, and he's finding peace, well then, that just makes all the things I'm dealing with pretty small when you think about it,
Yeah.
So I think that's a great story, man. So I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm glad you were there to tell that guy he needed some Jesus. So evidently that's all it took. That lit the fire, and look where he's at today. So that's great, man. So we want to talk next then about more a little about a few things, that some topics that we want to share with you guys about shoes of peace and how to put it in action and everything. So let's talk next, Chris, about worldly peace versus godly peace. So you've talked a lot about godly peace just now. We'll talk more about it in a second, but worldly peace, let's talk about that, right? I mean, so worldly peace, that's going to be your job, your bank account, your social media presence, your likes, your followers, it's going to be your fitness. It could be anything that you elevate above God, right?
Right.
Anything you idolize.
Yeah.
And I think that the world will tell you, hey, just take this pill, just do whatever, do this thing. You don't need God, right? You just do it the worldly way. This is what all the other people are doing. This is normal, right? Versus, godly peace, which is not normal, right? We're held to a different standard. We're a higher standard that we're supposed to meet. And we need to follow his peace for our life, his path for us, which probably not going to be the easiest path in most cases, but it's going to be the path to lead us to righteousness. And ultimately, that's what we need to be viewed as righteousness in God's eyes,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think as we're moving down this path and we're doing these works as directed by that feeling of peace in us, I think we have to remember, like, those works are coming from that faith.
Yeah.
Right? Like we talked about in our faith versus works episode. Like,
for sure.
We're not doing these things to try to build faith. We're doing these things from our faith.
Right.
And so I think there's a huge difference there. And I think when we lean into that, we can see, just as you mentioned, the world, they'll try to sell you a whole bottle of pills to help bring peace, or they'll try to numb you from whatever situation you are with a 4-hour movie of, sinking
your
ships.
problems can sit down for 4 hours while you watch this.
That's right. And,
or you can binge a whole 8 seasons if you want.
Yeah.
Nowadays.
You can just kill your streaming service. But I think, that's what the world's trying to sell is peace. And I think the enemy's really got its foot in that and been able to point us that direction and try to distract us and keep us away from what's really bringing the peace, and that's Jesus.
Right. Speaking of distractions, man, let's talk about noise, because I think we all deal with noise, right? Distractions, same thing. But let's talk about what disrupts our peace the most. So what do you think, Chris? What in your day-to-day life, what's something that you've either overcome or something that maybe pops up every now and then that has disrupted your peace?
Yeah, I think, especially in today's society and our current political situations and all the world events that are going on right now, I just really think a lot of us, we look at our bank accounts and we think, I don't have enough money in there, or, some of us have enough money in the bank to cover for that emergency fund, that they always suggest, like your 3 months of emergency fund or whatever. But a lot of folks don't.
Yeah.
And so that's scary when the world starts shifting around with stock markets and fuel prices and trying to haggle different deals with other countries and that kind of stuff. And I think that can be really scary. And so I think knowing that our local, state, and national leadership are doing these things, to try to better our country or better our stance in the world or whatever, I think that can be really scary for us as individuals. Mm-hmm. And, we're not, you and I are not trading with China or trading with another country. You and I, we're going to work, we're just regular working guys. And so I think that can be very unnerving sometimes to realize, where's that next dollar coming from? And I think just like we were talking about earlier in that stability piece, not leaning on us trying to figure out the whole situation. Being, we do have to be faithful in it. We do have to continue to do the work, put in the work that God's given us to do. And, whether it's, serving in your job or mine, in addition to being, parents and husbands, I think that those are things we have to continue to keep doing and trying to provide for our families. I also think that leaning in and believing and trusting God and finding that peace in Him can be a struggle sometimes to, like, do I trust God to go ahead and provide for our family, and I'm just going to keep doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and they're laying off people or they're reshaping or whatever. And that can be really scary and challenging. And so I think we do have to walk into that with faith and believe that God's got us, and that will bring us that peace and, trusting because we know what the Word says about God and we know that He is faithful, and then walking out His righteousness, as we've talked in the first two of the episodes of this Armor of God. But I think, like, it can be hard to find that peace in that storm. And so I found myself, recently, my wife and I were talking about that. Like, how do we navigate these waters that we're in right now? And, we both came to that same conclusion. We have to continue to do our woodshedding and continue to put in the work. And at the same time, we're continuing to trust that God will continue to provide for our family. Whether that's in this same job or not, that's okay. Mm-hmm. We're going to continue to trust Him. And so, like, those moments of wavering, I think it's how you overcome that. And, just taking that step back and realizing, like, I need to get back into peace. And so, when you start feeling that anxiety, that worry, look around and figure out where the peace went, because you're not standing in it.
Yeah. And that's a great example I think a lot of people can relate to in today's world, is this paycheck to paycheck world that we live in, man, is that, we're so reliant on our jobs and our finances and things to provide for us. And, I can't argue with that. I mean, we all have to work to provide a living for ourselves, and, and that's something that is very important. So it's sometimes it's difficult to put that faith in God, but, that's an area that maybe one of the last areas I think people put that faith in, and find that peace with. It's maybe a little easier in certain other areas, but I think that area is probably one of the harder ones, I think, for most people. They just want to take it in their own hands, Right. And as we know, throughout all Scripture, there's many examples taking things in your hands just doesn't really work.
That's right.
So for me, I would say, the noise that I certainly can relate to the job thing, just to make it different here. I think one thing that disrupts my peace or has in my past is just really what you intake. I think your entertainment, whatever you do to unplug, from your work, your day-to-day tasks, So I've been very conscious about, the content that I intake, from, TV shows to movies to sports, and how much I take in and how involved I want to be in knowing about all these things. I mean, at some point it stops. You get too much information, but either way, I think that's something that I've had to overcome. I put a lot of importance on entertainment. I'd work a full day, get home, I just want to turn my mind off and watch TV for 3-4 hours, and then I'll give God a little bit about what's left over. That's not really what God wants, I don't think you're going to find much peace through that. You're just giving God leftovers, and I was in that area through my 20s, I think, a lot, really. And it cost me a lot, dearly. As I'm sure you guys have heard in previous episodes, if you haven't, go back and listen. But today I'm more well-rounded. I realize that, hey, what comes in is going to come out. So I'm very cognizant about what I intake, because I don't want those things to be a distraction from me seeking peace through, seeking godly peace, because I don't ever want that. I enjoy that. A little bit of that worldly peace, I'll admit. I mean, I think we all, if we're being honest, I think we enjoy a little bit of that. It's nice to go to a ball game on a Sunday afternoon, with your kids. I mean, hey, those are precious moments. But at the end of the day, they don't mean squat compared to godly peace. And I think we just have to keep our priorities in line, and that's something I've had to do, and I've restructured my life that way. And I think my marriage and my relationship with my spouse and other people is so much better because I've had taken charge of that noise. So I think that's something I've had to overcome. And then one other question we want to talk about here is let's talk about how we can find peace in those difficult moments. I know you've had to make some very important decisions in your life.
Yeah.
Difficult ones.
Like I said, we had I retired after 20 years in the military, and trying to figure out what you're going to do after you've done the same job for 20 years. It's time to get a new chapter.
Yeah.
And so we were living in Oklahoma. We were really plugged in the church. We had small groups. Had my men's group. We also had a married group that we were in that we led. And my wife and I decided I'm just going to apply for some of these jobs. I applied for a bunch of the same job with the government.
Okay.
And we started interviewing shortly thereafter, and I turned down a couple. They were just too far away. And I just kind of wanted to test the water to see if I could maybe, if they thought I was good for these jobs.
See what you're worth, right?
Yeah. And so, I liked what they were offering, just it was too far away.
Yeah.
I had family, still got family in Oklahoma, and didn't want to be too far away from them. And so I got an opportunity here in Dallas area, in Texas, and decided, hey, let's give it a shot. So I went ahead, interviewed for that, got offered a position down here. Shortly after that, I got offered a position in Oklahoma, doing kind of what I do now, but still with the military. So I would be deployable and would be back overseas inevitably pretty soon thereafter. And so that wasn't what I was trying to do anymore. Like, I was ready to close that chapter in my life and, get something stable for my family and be able to be super involved with them and super involved in the church and, be able to be the godly husband I need to be. And so we had talked about that with our small group, our married group. And my wife and I had just asked them, like, hey, would you guys prayerfully ask God for guidance for us? Right. And kind of intercede for us. And so it was super cool because I'd applied for these jobs, got picked for this job, and, our group didn't know that I had interviewed or had been selected. But they were praying anyway. And so it was super cool.
Yeah.
When we asked them, a couple of weeks later, like, hey, we've got an opportunity. What do you guys think? And every one of them came to my wife and I and were like, absolutely, you guys need to take this.
Wow.
And it was like that peace that they found, knowing, like, they're telling us it's okay to go. Like, they know what this is going to bring. Like, we're not going to be close friends like that anymore.
Yeah.
We're going to literally move out of their lives, move away from family to a different state, and then have to rebuild again. And so, being a military family, we were kind of used to that.
Yeah.
Like, move here and there, and you get to rebuild every few years. But this was like building to build, like, permanently, right? And so that's kind of what we were looking for. And having that reassurance, that peace that kind of washed over us from the group, and then feeling that peace within us of, hey, this is the decision that I want you to make and go this direction. So I didn't, while staying in Oklahoma sounded tempting, it wasn't the peace that we were looking for and that we got out of the decision to move down to Texas. And so I think that was definitely God providing that peace and that hard decision, and then us looking for wisdom from those trusted individuals around us to pour back into us and to intercede for us. I think that was just a great opportunity for us to look back at it and see God at work in that. Yeah,
that's awesome, man. Great story. And wow, obviously you had some great people in your life then.
Yeah.
You had everything going on. You had comfort of what you already knew. You were established in the church. You had your family started. You had your more family close by, and you found peace somewhere else. That's not a lot of people be willing to do that, and I really admire that story. And you've told it to me before, and I just think that's great, man. I think I admire you for that and the courage you took. And I know it was not easy to make that decision. But that's just another great example of what it's like to follow. And when you put those shoes on, it can take you to some place you didn't expect to go. You had no idea you'd end up in Texas, but here you are, and because you did, we got the chance to meet.
That's right.
And here we are sitting in front of each other doing this podcast today, folks. So I hope that's a great, inspires all of you out there to be willing to take those steps. And be ready, because when you put those shoes on, man, it's going to lead you someplace you weren't expecting.
That's right.
For me, I'll share one real quick about a difficult moment that I've had to make and find peace in it. And that was when I was diagnosed with cancer a few years back. I've shared with you all a lot of that story, but the going through it, I don't think I've shared much with you about that. That's probably one of the hardest parts, is that uncertainty of the months it takes to figure out. In today's medical world, it's just a lot of hurry up and wait. You take a test and then you wait weeks and you wait another few weeks for an appointment and this and that. Once we finally got the likelihood of what I was dealing with, we had the choice, my wife and I, do we take the medical route, right, which is defined, had a lot of, there's pretty defined what to do, but there's some cost to it, of course, with side effects and long-term issues that could be popping up and such, or do we take some sort of alternative route? We fix it with a lot of diet and other factors, and less stress and all that stuff. Which, so we wrestled with that, quite a bit, to try to decide which route to take. And through my prayers, God, when I had my armor on, God told me to take the medicine route, right. And that's what I ended up taking. He let me know that this was the route that he wanted me to go. There's purpose and meaning behind all of that, and why I had cancer in the first place. And I've shared with you all about how, the first time I thanked God for bringing me through that, which helped me come full circle. But, I needed, it built my faith, of course, and it just let me know that, hey, even though there's a cost to this medical approach, not necessarily financially, although that was part of it, but also the health benefits are issues that I'm still dealing with today, the long-standing side effects and things of that nature. I've overcome all that, and I feel like today it's 6 years almost now, and since I've been cancer-free, and I feel the healthiest I've been really my whole life, and it's because of, I put those shoes on, and I made that choice to follow God's peace, and and He led me to a spot. I generally speaking, I would probably choose a non-medical route in most cases. I'm one of the last guys to pop a pill, but or to some sort of medical procedure, but that's what I needed to do, and consequently, I'm better off because of it. So I wouldn't have traded anything for it, but it was definitely a difficult decision. We had only a week or two to make the decision, because you got to move fast, once they figure out what it is. So that was definitely one that hit me. So, but I hope you guys are out there and using some of the same skills that we have to make those type of decisions. So before we wrap it up, we want to talk a little about how do we live this out, right, Chris? So, so the first thing, of course, you want to share the first one, Chris?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Just right off the bat, the very first thing we need to do is keep our shoes on.
Absolutely.
And we need to be ready to stand firm in God's peace. And so that's part of what we're trying to do in this episode, is show that you got to be stable. You got to have that firm foundation that's based in the truth, living out that righteousness, right? And so that's what we're doing. We're finding that peace in God. And that leads straight into that second point of, now it's time to become peacemakers.
Yeah.
And so we're taking the fight to the enemy. And so that's what we're doing, is we're bringing that peace into the world. And so, we're not looking to be peacekeepers and keep the status quo. Like, we're trying to lead a route towards peace. And so that's what we're doing here.
That's right. Making decisions, making peace works by faith, right?
That's right.
And if we ever find ourselves, in an anxiety situation or in a tough, difficult moment, like Chris and I shared here today, we got to refocus on Jesus and refocus on Him first.
That's right.
We don't take charge and then come back to Jesus after we've exhausted everything that we think we know what to do. No, man, we go with Jesus first. We don't waste time, thinking about, doing all we can and then resort to Jesus. No, we resort to Him first to get our armor on, get realigned with the truth and living in righteousness and having our shoes on, and He'll lead us to what steps to take so we can find, happiness in this life and whatever we're supposed to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we don't want to get to the point where we're like, well, now all we have is, we just pray and hope.
Yeah.
Like, why would you make God a last resort?
I don't know why people say that.
Yeah. Let's not be doing that. Let's let's lead with that faith, lead with that peace.
Yes.
Understand the God that we worship, the God that we find salvation in, is bigger than our situation. And lean into that and walk boldly in that righteousness that he's given us, and find in that peace that he's providing us.
Absolutely, man. Well, listen, I've really enjoyed this episode. I hope everybody out there has enjoyed it as well. This Armor of God, man, this is super cool. I've been loving this series. We got, 3 more?
Yep, 3 more
to deliver to y'all. So they're coming. We appreciate all the feedback. We've been getting some reviews and such on the different directories out there. Thank you all for doing that. Please continue to share, like, subscribe. Send us your feedback, good or bad. I mean, what do you like? What do you don't like? This is a work in progress still. So we're just going to continue to do it and give you guys some great content. And hope that you guys continue to come back. We're going to have, like I said, another one coming here next week for the Armor of God. Well, in 2 weeks, I guess, our next episode comes out. So you guys keep living out, keep putting that armor on each day, and we'll see you next time. In the meantime, keep grinding.